I'm Folasade Pyne, the host of Unscripted Conversations, a new, exciting, revolutionary experience for our people to have complex conversations about issues directly affecting our community. I'm Folasade Pyne. Welcome to Unscripted Conversations. Today, we have a powerful conversation in store for you. We'll be talking about birthing justice as a human right. We're in the midst of a global crisis in maternal health care for Black women. In the United States, Black women are over 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women, and their babies are half as likely to survive in the first year. In the nation's capital, the maternal mortality rate is almost twice the national rate, and the number of C-sections forced on women drastically increased since 1970 and carry overall higher rates of maternal mortality and morbidity, which is the post-birth health issues. Statistics show that 3 in 5 pregnancy-related deaths are preventable. This conversation will explore the personal experiences of our panelists, what birth equity looks like, and the work being done to fight for this human right. With us today, we have Bruce McIntyre III. Bruce McIntyre is a mental and maternal health advocate, educator, and activist who founded the Save a Rose Foundation after losing his soulmate, Amber Rose Isaac, to an unscheduled emergency C-section. Since then, Bruce has become a fearless advocate for families and racial disparities within the medical system. His mission is to combat and dismantle systemic flaws within the medical system in order to create better birthing outcomes with a focus on birth equity. Courtney Glenn has supported families as a doula, childbirth educator, and now student midwife. Drawn to birth work through her interests and experience in public policy development and analysis, she has become intent on amplifying issues of birth and reproductive health disparity. By training and supporting families in the community that she is a part of, Courtney hopes to educate and support in a way that makes personal choice and out of the hospital birth available to everyone who desires the experience. Folasade Ogunmokun is the founder and CEO of Unscripted TV. Her experience as a mom is what pushed her into the work of redefining the way we see ourselves in the media. And her experience with her son's birth is what brings her into this conversation today. More than 10 years ago, she was forced to have an emergency C-section, which has been an experience that many women of color can relate to. She hopes Unscripted and shows like Unscripted Conversations can help bring change to the way we navigate our future as a community. Thank you to each of our panelists.
Are you looking for content authentically created by and for the Black community? Visit unscripted.tv, an SVOD platform for Black audiences that's free and Black-owned and operated. No other platforms for Black audiences offer 24-hour free streaming and on demand. Join the creators and businesses building a meaningful fan base through cooperative economics. It's Black, it's free, it's unscripted. Visit us online and download on your devices.
Let's get into the show. All right, so today's conversation on birthing justice is critical, and it's really important for us to establish birthing justice as a human rights issue. This is not just a women's issue. It's not a Black issue, but this is a human rights issue. And so we have 2 incredible panelists here with us today. We have Courtney Glenn and we have Bruce McIntyre. And I just want to give them a moment to introduce themselves and just share a bit about what brings them to this conversation. And I want to start with Bruce. He has a personal experience with birthing justice. So I want to pass it over to him.
Hello, everyone. Bruce McIntyre III. founder of the Save a Rose Foundation and the partner to Amber Rose Isaac, the father to Elias Isaac McIntyre as well. And I meaninglessly lost Amber Rose Isaac due to medical negligence that stemmed from an emergency C-section, and she didn't make it. And I've been doing this work in her honor since her passing of April 21st, 2020. Um, our story has went viral. I've been speaking on an international scale to try to help mothers and families and prevent them from facing the same fate.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing your story. And now I want to pass it over to Courtney to give a bit of her background and what brings her to this conversation.
Hi, everyone. I am Courtney Glenn, a childbirth educator and student midwife based in Richmond, Virginia. I have been doing birth work, committed to helping grow families and communities for the past almost 13 years. And it's just a personal passion that has become my profession. And I want to do everything possible, not only to decrease maternal mortality and morbidity in this country, but just amplify the need for us to educate ourselves and advocate and know what to expect and how to navigate medical systems and pregnancy in the perinatal year.
And our third panelist is Folasade Ogunmokun, and she is the founder of Unscripted TV, and she's actually directly impacted by birthing justice as well. So I'm going to pass it over to her to share her story.
Thank you so much for kind of making this completely full circle. I think that we have an amazing group of people here. And the reality is that while both of them have direct experiences and are working in this birth justice or reproductive justice, my experience was from what I went through 10 years ago when I had my son. The reality is that I ended up having to get a emergency C-section so that my doctor could go on vacation. So it's very unfortunate, and I know that there's a lot of people who have very similar stories, especially Black women. Almost all of my friends ended up having emergency C-sections that wasn't a part of our plans, and while we're all able to kind of walk away with a scar, I know that there are a lot of people that weren't able to walk away from the situation. And by having a platform like Unscripted and by having a dope person like Folasade who's able to run a show like Unscripted Conversations, I thought that this was a super important conversation that we needed to address right now so that we can really figure out steps and ways to protect not only our Black women, but reality is our Black community so that we can continue to bear children, so that we can continue to grow. So I thank you for being a part of this conversation, everyone who's on it. And I want to get into it and figure out what we can do. So thank you, Folasade.
Thank you so much, Folasade, Courtney, Bruce, for giving the audience a bit of background about who you are. And I just want to touch on why you guys got into the work that you do, especially Bruce and Courtney, because this is your everyday work. And so I want to start with I want to go ahead and start with Bruce again to tell a bit about the work that you're currently doing and how you got into this work in general.
So I got into this work after losing my partner Amber Rose Isaac due to an unscheduled C-section that stemmed from medical negligence. I've been doing this work in her honor since her passing of April 21st, 2020. And since then, I've become an educator, a human civil community maternal rights activist. I've also got into policy making. Right now, we're currently trying to bring a freestanding midwifery-led birthing center to the Bronx. I was actually a part of the efforts in getting our midwifery bill passed and signed by Kathy Hochul, which will allow us to now operate midwifery-led birthing centers in New York State. We're right now we're trying to bring a maternal a van, what we call womb bus, and this will offer prenatal, postnatal services to the underserved communities of the Bronx and hopefully beyond. Just so we're taking care of our people until the birthing center is up. We also have a scholarship program called the Ambrose Isaac Access to Homebirth Scholarship, which offsets the cost of insurance premiums, and it allows people with such like Medicaid to have successful home births without having to pay much out of pocket at all. We have this program up until we are able to figure out a way that we can make insurance, such as Medicaid, cover for home births. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I've also been speaking and teaching racial bias to medical students, such as I was teaching students in Harvard, Yale, Columbia, New York School of Med. Um, so I'm currently constantly doing this work every day. Our documentary Aftershock just dropped as well. And it was known as, it got rewarded as one of the most impactful films at Sundance. And then I'm also in another documentary called Everything's Gonna Be All White. That's going to be premiering on Showtime on February 11th this month.
Wow, Bruce, you are doing incredible work, and I want to thank you for dedicating your life to this this work. You mentioned a lot of really important things. Having Medicaid cover things like home birth. There's a big issue with having access to the services that many Black women need, and so it's incredible that the work that you're doing with your organization is providing access through scholarships, through the womb bus, which you mentioned. Um, my concern right now, and I want to touch, I also want to pass it over to Courtney to touch on this as well, is like when these services are offered, how are they being received by medical professionals? How are the doctors receiving doulas that are coming into the hospitals? Um, is there pushback when doulas come in and establish their expertise in the doctor's domain, which is the hospital? So I do want to pass it over to Courtney just to give a little bit of her insight as a birth worker.
Sure. So, I mean, I think that the answer to that question is much like anything else, where it's yes and no. And I think a lot of that depends on the philosophy of the provider that you are being supported by. There are doctors and OB and labor and delivery nurses who absolutely love to see doulas supporting what we would call our clients, who are their patients. And there are those who are resistant. And what I like to encourage people to do is at that first appointment, at that initial OB appointment where you have gotten a positive pregnancy test, you've had that first ultrasound, and the longest appointment typically that you will have, even though it's still short in most cases, ask some questions of that provider, especially if you're seeing an OB. How do you feel about doulas? What is your C-section rate? Do you have any vacations or conferences or whatever scheduled during my due time? There are things that we can do that will really kind of give us a temperature check on what that provider is about, what their philosophy is, and how welcoming they are of the things that you desire at your birth. So, as much as the answer is yes, there are some providers who are resistant to doula support. There are many who are welcoming, but you can find out a lot by asking questions.
Are you looking for content authentically created by and for the Black community? Visit Unscripted.tv, an SVOD platform for Black audiences that's free and Black-owned and operated. No other platforms for Black audiences offer 24-hour free streaming and on demand. Join the creators and businesses building a meaningful fan base through cooperative economics. It's Black, it's free, it's unscripted. Visit us online and download on your devices.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And, with that conversation about doulas and doula support, it was recently brought to my attention that the term doula itself is something that is controversial and that a lot of people who work in birthing justice are moving away from. And so, as someone who knows a lot about that, could you just break that down to our members, what that current language shift is about?
Yeah, so I think in recent years, we have shifted away from the term doula and birth worker. Not only is it a little bit more all encompassing in the sense that most doulas, particularly Black doulas, are not just with you when you birth your baby and then leave. We are in your home supporting you, after during that postpartum period, or we are with you and your family, answering questions, getting to know everyone who will be present at your birth and in your home and what your family and community support looks like. So a
Mhm.
lot of us call ourselves birth workers now. Doula, the etymology of the word in Greek means female slave. So in addition to, our, particularly as Black women, thoughts about our ancestors being enslaved people and not wanting to continue that connotation of the word, many of us have moved away from referring to ourselves as doulas, but more so birth workers.
Did you want to chime in, Folasade?
No, it's just there's so many conversations and so many things that we don't know is rooted in the past, and we have to like continue to live through things and try and adjust, and sometimes without information that can really affect how we move or why we move that way. So it's just it's sad that a lot of times I'm learning things from having these types of conversations that we're putting on, like and I don't, it's uncomfortable.
I mean, the language of birth is so loaded, right? Like, just like, in addition to, the term doula versus birth worker, but also things like, you know, in the conversation that we had about your son's birth, right? Like, this idea that you had a C-section, or, sometimes people will say, like, I remember a client asking if a hospital would allow her to eat during labor. Like, you do not need permission to exist and do the things that will fuel your body and help you birth your baby. There are lots of conversations that I tell clients all the time. If you go on a tour of a particular hospital and there are certain words that you hear or the way that they are framing things that make you a passive actor in the birth of your baby, you should, like, that is a sign that, maybe this is not the place to birth this child. And ask a couple more questions of your provider, because if they support birth here, this is where they work, it's likely that they are comfortable with things that are not going to lead to the outcome that you desire.
That's a very, very good point. It's making sure that people um, feel like an active participant in this process and not feel like they're being talked over or discounted. And so that makes me think of you, Bruce, as a male who is doing this work. I mean, males are not the predominant birth workers. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday who said there's no such thing as a male doula. Those things, men are in this work, but not at this point. You're probably considered a minority, a rarity in this work. So, what has your experience been like as a man advocating for birth justice?
I mean, it's been very interesting actually, stepping into this work, because I've always been, like, I'm really big on history, and I'm really big on my activism work, before maternal health. And stepping into maternal health was definitely a challenge for me, because it was something that I actually had to sit down and learn. um, at the time, of our pregnancy, I barely knew or understood what a midwife or a doula was for. So it was actually me who did the research, and I was the one who found our midwife. Um, but coming into this work, and trying to educate people on maternal health, sometimes you don't want to cross boundaries, of course. Like, you don't want to tell a woman about herself or about her health, because sometimes you just feel like that's not your place. But I feel like I've been getting a lot of good feedback, because all of the information that I bring forward has been accurate. But I have stepped into spaces, like, I'm also a part of the New York State Birthing Center Association, which are all female midwives. And there are only, few of color at that. And when I first got invited to be at the seat, people were just really confused to why I was there, who I was, and basically um, why I feel worthy enough to be a part of this committee. And then they found out that I was the founder of Savor Rose and looked at all of the accolades that I had already accomplished within, the first 6 months. At that point, we're going on a year and a half now, almost 2 years. But yeah, I've had people look at me different for stepping into this work, and just thinking that I might not know what I'm talking about or know what I'm doing. But I feel like I've proven myself. I've gotten a lot done within my foundation and my team. And then I'm a listener, and I'm someone who also incorporates our and utilizes our birth workers and our midwives, because I'm still learning myself. So of course I introduce them to people, or I have them do educational pieces on people as well, or I'm making those connections, and really getting people the accurate information, and working with birth workers and doulas. That also allows me to craft the legislation that I craft as well, because I'm listening, and I'm hearing the concerns, and I'm also using my personal experience and what I've witnessed. Luckily, my job gave me the leniency to be beside Amber at all of her prenatal appointments. I took her to all of her appointments up until the pandemic struck, and they were no longer letting me inside. But I was paying attention to what they were telling her, and how they were treating her. Um, and, I feel like people really understood that this is a mission for me, and the way that I've advocated and got our point across, and helped push for reproductive justice and birthing equity. Um, I feel like people trust the work that I do, so it does feel good. But Sade brought up a really interesting point earlier, where she was saying that her doctor went on vacation. I didn't really speak on it then, but I would like to speak on it now. Amber went through the same thing. Amber had a provider, and she went off to India and pushed her down to five different doctors who were signing off on her paperwork as her health is clearly deteriorating. But that lack of communication from the OB, that her main care provider, was not being passed down. So now you're going through like this assembly line care, where they're not building the rapport, they're not empathizing with you, they're not listening to you, because they feel like they can just go off their paperwork and everything is fine. And that's not it. And we need to be cared for. That's the main thing, and we need to be heard. And that's where we're not being heard. We're not, and we're seeing a lot of these um, unfortunate incidents occur, um, from not listening. So I just wanted to speak on that a bit.
And I just want to touch base on that because you said something just now, which is very similar to what I went through, but also Courtney had said something which I was like, because first when I went into labor, my stomach went flat, which was completely weird, and I was like, why is my stomach flat? So that's why I went. I didn't have a doula, I didn't have a midwife, someone who I could talk to actually know, like, yo, it might be okay. He's just dropping. So I went in, and the doctor, I already had a doctor appointment that day, and he was like, you're not really whatever, but I'm just gonna go in and break your water. So like he just went in and he broke my water, and then we started the whole laboring process. But I wanted to get into the tub. I wanted to do stuff to try and relax, and they were like, no. They were just like kind of forcing certain things on me. So the way that I was motivated to have my son was I was really hungry. I did not eat the day before. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning when this happened, and they told me I could not eat. So that I had to give him. So they started telling me to push. I had no urge to push. They were like, push, push. So I'm pushing. My sister buys this pizza. She brings it in. I can smell the pizza. I'm so hungry. So I'm trying to force this baby out. He's nowhere near ready. Me doing these fake pushings to get him down. I guess it caused his heart rate to go up, and they were just like, yeah, we're just gonna take you in 19 hours of this, and they're like, we're just gonna take you in, and I was like, no, I want to push now, and he was like, it's too late, and I was just like, so now I want to push, and now I'm ready to push, but because you've already you've induced to me, you've broken my water, you've done all these things to make this so much quicker than it was supposed to be. I wasn't able to relax. I can't eat the pizza, and then even after that I couldn't eat the pizza. Like, now you're telling me I have to have this emergency C-section. Like, I felt like I had no control over anything. I was being told everything. And then the next day, after I was being told that I also needed to get a blood transfusion because I had lost so much blood or something, that was when they told me that my doctor was about to go on vacation. So then it all made sense. Like, he was rushing all these things to happen so that he could get me out of the way and just go on his merry own vacation. And here I am having to be in the hospital and dealing with this wound and dealing with a whole plan that I had never put in place because somebody else wanted to rush me and somebody else told me what I could do with my body. And then even after that, I didn't see my son for, I want to say, like, the first 8 hours of his life, and he lost a whole pound. And I told them, like, give me greens, I'm not getting no blood transfusion. Like, there was just so many things that felt like I wasn't being heard. And I can only imagine with my story that's how I felt, and that's how I still feel 10 years later, and still can remember all of that. So I cannot imagine what it feels like to be the partner to someone, and you lose her, and you know that whole storyline about the doctors just kind of passing her along, or even being a midwife, a doula, someone that's actually in the birth working world, where you have to witness this every day with your clients and trying to figure out what the heck is the next thing that you're supposed to do to make it different. Like, this is crazy, and I can't believe that we don't have that control over our own bodies to be able to take care of the babies that we're trying to bring into this world.
And that's just the system that we have. As you're seeing, over 60% of the women that are receiving C-sections don't need the C-sections. Um, that's more than half that we're talking about. And these hospitals are collecting those incentives because it's now it's becoming now it's becoming this surgical issue, and now the hospital is receiving like 50% more than what they would have made from a natural birth. And that's what we're seeing in these underserved areas where a lot of these hospitals are making up for their budget cuts by cesareans. And that's just the sad, unfortunate truth. And yeah, like Amber was being passed down, she was getting that assembly line model of care. It was actually our midwife that brought to the attention that Amber's health was deteriorating rapidly after receiving so much neglect and so much incompetence that I found our midwife. We got her medical records over, and our midwife the next day was breaking down everything that was going on because she was unable to accept us, due to Amber being so high risk at this point. And our OB was not making us aware of any of that. We actually ended up, since we couldn't go to a birthing center, we couldn't have a home birth. We ended up going to another hospital where her mom actually worked at for 25 years out of Amber's 26 years of life. It's still the same, under the same Montefiore umbrella that she was seeing from her first provider. And they're filling her mom with these empty promises. Oh, we're gonna take good care of her. We're gonna take good care of her. She's gonna be all right. While they're losing her paperwork, they're canceling her appointments, and trying to reschedule. They actually rescheduled her last appointment to a few days after she passed away. So that would have been detrimental towards saving her life. And once we get into the hospital, her health is so bad. They're trying their best to blame it on COVID, and maybe it's COVID. They don't know what she has. Tested her 3 times for COVID, came back negative every time. They're still telling her they're going to treat her like a COVID patient. Her head surgeon never showed up for her, and she got passed down to much younger doctors, which I'm still unclear of, but I do believe that they were residents at the time because they were letting residents and undergrads perform at the hospitals during these times as well. So she got passed down yet again. That assembly line got passed down to a much younger team of doctors who didn't know what they were doing, found out that she had HELP syndrome, and induced her that same day. And a lot of people don't know about platelets, but if your platelet count is at 150, it needs to be monitored. If it's at 125, it needs to be monitored and prepped for treatment. And by the time Amber was in the hospital, after advocating for herself and talking about the deterioration of her health, by the time she made it to the hospital and they induced her labor, her platelet levels were already at 20. So her blood was unable to clot, and her blood was water-like at this point. And as you were saying earlier, the same thing that they did to you. They, pushed cesarean section on her. They used that sense of urgency to push her in the arms of irrational decision making. And she bled out immediately. They actually cut her open 3 different times, knowing that her blood was like water, and they're still telling us, "Oh, she's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be all right." Trying to assure us and giving me these promises that she's gonna be okay. And that's just the system that we're seeing. Even afterwards, they still weren't listening to her. They were trying to take her organs after she said that she wasn't an organ donor. Um, they were trying to send her body to Hart Island and dump her in a mass grave with COVID patients, even though she didn't have COVID. She Her death certificate never got signed off by a medical examiner, but the autopsy was performed by the head surgeon that was neglecting her. So we have all these red flags. And this is just the system that we're seeing. And then you think that there's a system in place that's working for us, and then you realize it's much more deeper than the hospital, and that it's dipping into politics. Because we had people like Governor Cuomo go on TV and these council meetings talk about us and our situation, and the maternal task force is going to help us and take care of this. Not one time have they reached out. Did they ever try to help? No. Governor Cuomo turned around and tried to create an executive order trying to prevent families like mine from taking legal action, and this was approved maybe 2 days after Amber passed away. um, and they were trying to basically cover this up. So this is why I've gotten into the work that I've gone into, and have been so refusious, and just been going so hard at this, because this is the system that we're seeing from everyone. Women are advocating for themselves and they're not being heard, and we just have to bring this stuff to the forefront, because unfortunately this is what people are going through, and they think they're alone, so they're suffering in silence. So this is where it's big for us to educate and speak on personal issues, to address all of this and bring all of this to the forefront, which I'm glad I'm seeing, and a lot of people are seeing now, how these hospital systems are treating people. There are women who I've spoken to personally who are scared to death to go inside of the hospital, where they felt like they needed to just give birth at home by themselves. That they felt like they had a better chance at doing that, and fortunately, we were able to get them midwifery care and things like that. But there are women who are scared because of these issues, because it's a very real issue. We have a bill also that we're bringing forward called the Amber Rose Isaac Act, which pays reparations towards families like mine. That it'll cover funeral expenses and cover childcare expenses. Within of the first short few weeks of the passing. And unfortunately, we're going to have to bring these clauses while women are giving birth, just in case something happens to them. Where would you like this to be sent? How would you like funds to be allocated? Where would you like them to go? So we have to, give forms like this to women just in case, something happens to them, and that's just the unfortunate truth of what we're having to do to protect ourselves.
Wow, thank you, Bruce, for breaking that down and sharing, so much about your personal experience, and especially during COVID, because we're in two crises. This is a double crisis. This is an entire global pandemic that we're in, and there's so many mothers who have had challenges giving birth during this time, especially because there's so many limitations as to who can be in the room during birth. There's a limitation on how many people. I have a good friend who had to choose between her doula and her husband. She was only allowed to have one person, and who wants to make that decision, right? That's a hard decision to make. Somebody who helped make this child, who is just as attached to the outcome, and then someone who could possibly save your life in the event of medical negligence and terrorism. And I want to pass it to Courtney to hear if to talk about like your experience during COVID, providing birth working services.
I think you are right. I was going to raise the point, just as you did, that COVID has only exacerbated the issues that we've seen related to the maternal health crisis in this country. And, I think that on one hand, COVID has, I don't want to use the word beneficial, but it has amplified the issues within the medical industrial complex and the system and caused people to see that, like, okay, I really need to educate myself and I need to go into my birth and this labor armed with information and ready, to be an active part of this experience. Um, and, as much as I feel like during one of the most vulnerable periods and experiences of your life, you should not have to feel like you are armed with information and ready to go to war with, you know, your providers in the moment. Like, right? That should be the least of our concerns, things that are not even on people's radar. But I think that COVID has caused people to think about this in a way that, like, I need to make sure that I am prepared for multiple outcomes and have contingency plans for what I want to happen if and when, XYZ things occur. Um, During COVID, I know for me, we have a very active birth community full of birth workers who work in partnership with a lot of the hospitals and birth centers and home birth practices in this area. So early on, it was very, doulas were not willing to say, we just will not be part of our clients' births. So hospitals really began to think through what that looked like. So a lot of us were getting tested regularly, and they put policies in place that, like, once you enter the hospital with your client, you cannot leave until this baby is born. So there were restrictions, but I think due to our advocacy, our clients did not have some of the unfortunate experiences that I have read and heard about in other areas of the country. However, what I would like to say, and kind of to return to Bruce's initial point, is that birth partners, the people who will be with you in the birth setting, are so important. So important to your experience. I love, Bruce, that you were like, I went to all the appointments. I knew what was going on. I love in the birth center as an apprentice midwife when partners come in and are like, this client may not remember what their eating habits have been since the last appointment, or they may not remember the fact that, they had a headache 3 nights ago or something like that. But partners, the people closest to you, are so important. So as you build your birth team, I definitely think, remember to include the people who you just kind of expect to be around and take for granted. Make them feel like they are part of this experience too, because they can communicate information to your providers that you sometimes cannot, or things that you are just like, I am living in this body, growing this baby, and did not think about this. But it could be something that, we want to continue to monitor. We want to pay close attention to, that your birth partner can share with us. And I think that speaks even more to community, especially related to, birthing babies and growing families. Community is so important. Your friends and your aunts and your family members and people who are just around can all be supportive in ways that we sometimes just take for granted. Whether it's, this person asking you, like, okay, I know you're craving, whatever this fast food or whatever is, during your pregnancy, but let's think about what that sodium is going to do to your blood pressure. You know, how many leafy greens have you consumed this week? Like, those are all things that we can do, whether you have taken a training or, you know, you have a credential or anything like that. You can be just as helpful and integral in the success and health of this pregnancy by just being an advocate and concerned about whoever you know that is pregnant.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, that's a incredible part. Like it's a team. It's a team effort. And I think,
Hmm.
society has boxed this into being a women's issue for so long. But Bruce is a prime example of why a man, the father is such an integral part of the process. Like this is a team effort to bring life into this world and to make sure that the forces working against us bringing life into this world do not win. So thank you so much for highlighting that, Courtney. Uh, and I know we've talked a lot about, statistics and about all of the harm that's ongoing. But I want to take a moment for us to talk about a path forward and like imagining a world free, where we're free of these of this medical terrorism. What does that look like? And dignity, dignity in the birthing process. Um, what does that look like to you? What does that look like for across the board? Because we have individual doulas who can come in and transform the life of one individual, but there's so many people who right now don't have that access. So what does it look like to you? I just want to hear from each of you, and I want to start with Folasade.
Um, that that's a great question. Here I am now, 10 years removed, and I would like to still have children in the years that I have left to give birth. So for me, I think what that looks like is one, being able to build out my team, like you're saying, to make sure that I'm able to have the right people that understand the needs that I have, or that understand my body, my birth chart, the stuff that I've been through, and can properly help me get to that proper plan. I already talked about having a VBAC already because I wanna have that in mind. And a few of my gynecologists that I've gotten rid of had said, "Oh no, you're gonna have to have another C-section," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. Like I worked out, I did this." So the future to me would be to be able to advocate what I want, and to have the person that I'm working with to not hear what I'm saying and tell me no, but to find ways to help make that at least as close as possible as possible.
I love that, and I want to just break down VBAC for our listeners. A VBAC is the vaginal birth after a cesarean section, and that is something that is possible. And as Falashe mentioned, we hope that that's something that she'll be able to do. But there are doctors who are going to say that no, it's not possible. Um, and so I'd love to hear from Courtney and Bruce as well about your vision for freedom and dignity in pregnancy.
Go
And
ahead,
either
Bruce.
one.
So what it looks like to me is exactly what we're trying to create on our end. More people that look like us from our community. People that can empathize with us. Um, you know, uh, midwifery-led birthing centers where we are seeing um, better birthing outcomes. And it's actually a cheaper and a more affordable option. However, it's not through insurance because insurance doesn't want to cover it. Um, not receiving because we're not receiving the standard of care. We need quality care. We need universal health care. Um, we we need to be treated like everyone else. We need to completely dismantle and reimagine the system because there's people talk to me all the time about restoring faith in the system. There's no putting faith in the system that was designed to work against us, and not for us. We have to completely dismantle and rebuild. and reimagine if we want better birthing outcomes. As you see, after a black, brown, or indigenous woman gives birth, they're already ready to tie their tubes or put them on some sort of, some sort of care where they're not receiving children anymore. But they're not doing this to Jewish women. Jewish women are keeping their wombs completely protected. They're having 5, 6, 7 kids, no problem, and they're receiving that care. But whenever it comes to us, it's like they're trying to stop our production. And right now, what we're seeing in our system is clearly genocide. Um, that needs to be abolished completely. And we just need to be seen like as human beings that we are, and that we feel just like everybody else feels. We don't tolerate pain better than another demographic. You know, and that we have feelings, and we want to be treated with respect and dignity. Um, and I say this all the time. It's real unfortunate that we have to create laws to protect us. We have to create laws to treat us equally. We have to create laws to get respect. Um, we have to create laws to be heard. And that just says enough about what America is. Um, and when I say like completely reimagine the system, this system was put into place and thought of in 1815, and then pushed into the general hospitals in 1830. And then it moved on to J. Marion Sims and him, the gynecologist that was performing on slaves. And then following his model of care, and they actually just took down his monument in Central Park in like 2018. So like they're just now catching up and catching on. Um, but yeah, and then also another thing that I'm seeing and that I'm also trying to change as well. There are women who are wanting to become midwives, but they can't do that in New York State. So now they're having to go to California, to Florida to become midwives, to get licensed and come back and serve their communities. And that's not something that we should be doing. They make it harder for Black and brown women to become midwives, doulas, birth workers. Um, and it's done like that intentionally, so that white women can craft the profession of midwifery. Even though it was something that started with us, and even when we were on the plantations, we were the medical providers, we were the birth workers. And it's just another way of whitewashing, and them taking what is ours yet again, and trying to sell it back to us. So we just need to completely revamp that whole situation, and make things easier for our people. Like with our midwifery birthing center bill, we didn't get everything that we asked for. Even though we can open midwifery-led birthing centers, it still affects Black and brown communities who can't afford to purchase land and then go through the application process. Those that's mainly built for someone that's already established. So really just trying to define those lines, and make things more accessible to us. And that's what we need. We need access, and we need to, what I tell people as well is we need to come together as this big umbrella and just have a bunch of networks under us. And that's just what we need to be doing as a Black community. Um, yeah, because there are people who are out here who are intentionally harming us, or who are putting moral value over money. And that's just what we need to see. We need to see people being taken care of over money. um, we're not just a number, we're not just a meal ticket. We're people with lives and families, and we need to be recognized as such.
Wow, that was so powerful. Bruce, you summed up so much in your just in your vision. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to pass it over to Courtney as well to hear her reimagining of birth?
Much like Bruce, my ideal looks like midwifery-led maternity care. We need a paradigm shift that um, centers the pregnant person, right? This woman, right? Like, I think, as Bruce said, historically on the plantation and in our communities after slavery, the midwives were pillars in their communities. And we need a return to that. Midwives are experts in low intervention, normal birth. For most of us, no intervention, right? So, a lot of people see an OBGYN who is skilled in obstetrics and gynecology, but most births are low risk. So why would that person not see a midwife? How much better would our care be comprehensively if your gynecologist could focus on your fibroids or, your ovarian cancer or whatever, issue that was going on within your reproductive system, and allow the midwives to focus on birth. I think Black midwives, especially out there, are a number of types of midwives, particularly professional midwives and nurse midwives. And as the apprentice that I am, an apprentice professional midwife, there are 2% of us that are Black. We need more of us in these communities. And like Bruce said, we need access to training and, access to skill shares and the ability to train. A lot of us, myself included, have come to this work after being in another profession. When you apprentice, you don't get paid. How many people is that excluding from the training? How many Black midwives are left working in another field because they have families or responsibilities that do not allow them to take 2 to 3 years out of their life and learn for free? What does that look like? We need accessible care, like Folasade was saying. You need a team that is going to say, VBAC is possible. You have been doing the work to prepare your body. We support this, and continue to have conversations about what that looks like and what the risks might be, but how we're going to mitigate them and how we're going to look ahead during your pregnancy and labor to make sure that this remains safe. And in the event that for whatever reason someone's birth now is no longer low risk, if something changes, then we can access a higher level of care in a hospital system and get the support of an OB who is a surgeon. So, like, those kinds of things are my ideal. Let's be in conversation with one another. I certainly do not believe that, the medical industrial complex and people, particularly Black people, should be at war, right? This requires a collaborative effort. But until we get to that point, we have to arm ourselves with knowledge and information that sets us up for success and allows us to reproduce in the ways that we desire. So ideally, I know that where we are now and where we want to be, there is a lot of distance in between. But I think it's conversations like these. It's the work that Bruce does. It is the community of birth workers that I am in. It is you all having these conversations with your pregnant friends and, making the efforts to educate yourselves before you have children that makes the difference and gets us closer to our goals.
Wow, thank you.
And I'm really glad that you actually say that, because we see so much of that going on, that it's becoming the norm to us, and I hear that from a lot of people. But I'm in these city council meetings every month, and I'm in these council hearings every month. I've actually been on calls with the committee of health, and the judge will call them out. Hey, you guys need a midwifery department. Will you spend $50,000 out of your company's budget? You guys have billions of dollars. Will you spend $50,000 per year for a midwife and a midwifery department? And they'll say, oh well, it was on our list. Oh, it was on our plan board for next year. And the judge calls them out. No, it's not. No, it wasn't. I don't see this in any of your plans. Because they're clearly putting profit over people. The judge will tell them, you guys have more than enough to spend that for a midwifery department, and they'll flat out lie in your face, saying, "Oh, we're thinking about it. We've had talks about it," when they clearly have not. So really just calling that out, and calling it for what it is, which is also why I've gone into this work, because in the art of war, the best way to get somebody's attention is going for their pockets. And which is why I've started up these businesses and getting them aligned, because okay, you guys don't want to take care of my people, I'm gonna help take care of my people. I'm gonna bring people together, and we're gonna take care of us. We don't need to be putting money in your pocket. I see my tax money isn't even saving me. I'm paying for my own ticket. So it comes to us. It comes down to us building for ourselves and putting money into our own communities versus giving it to these people who aren't caring about us. Because we literally gave birth to our son, and Amber passed away, and I have doctors tapping me on my back. Oh, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be all right. You're gonna be okay. As they get to go home and have lunch and dinner with their families. And that's something that's going to stick with me forever. Just how I was being treated, how Amber was being treated, how she still continues to be treated, how the system has been treating me down to the court system. It's been almost 2 years, and I still don't have my name on my son's birth certificate because I'm clearly being targeted for the work that I do. That's what happens when we speak out. That's what happens when we speak up for ourselves. This is what happens when they get caught red-handed. Instead of saying, okay, we were wrong, we really need to take care of your family. It was the midwives and the birth workers that stood up for me, that got me. They got me breast milk, that because Amber was very healthy. Amber had a strict diet she was on. She was a pescatarian up until she became pregnant, held a strict vegan diet. One of the most healthiest people I've ever known in my life, which was really confusing to why her health was deteriorating like this. And that's why I just advocate for midwives and doulas so much, because I do believe in that care of being cared for and treated before, during, and after pregnancy and throughout postpartum, because that's very important to mental health. I had like my mother was dealing with postpartum, and I didn't understand postpartum until I got into this work. And we didn't really have a good relation. But now that I understand what she had gone through as a parent and raising 5 children as a single mother, what that has done to her mental health. And I believe if she would have had a birth worker, a doula, a midwife there for her, I feel like she would have gone through it a lot differently. But yeah, that's just very, very important, because we have all these women, all these people, who now have these mental health issues, and who are also dealing with trauma, who are trying to live their everyday lives. So, midwives and doulas are absolutely important, and should be brought up to the forefront. And that's another reason why I was so happy to get this bill passed, because now, Committee of Health has to work with our midwives and our doulas, because midwives are now a part of the board. So now we do have a say so. Now we do have a foot in, and we're in a perfect position to advocate for ourselves, and change some bills. So yeah, it's great that you brought that up.
Bruce, I think also it's important to talk about, as much as we talk about maternal mortality, and I certainly am not saying this to take away from your experience, but morbidity is an issue also, which means you survived, but what are you left with? And when we talk about these mental health issues, the trauma of birth, lots of people have birth trauma that they don't even recognize because it's just thought to be part of the experience. No, this is not normal. Now as an apprentice, I work with women who have positive birth experiences every day and go on to tell other people about it. But because insurance doesn't cover the kind of care that I provide, it's limited to people who can afford the out of pocket cost of a midwifery team. That is unfair, and problematic on in so many different levels. But because we know the majority of births currently take place in the hospital setting, and there is a lot of passive existence or passive, action, and people are telling you what to do and creating a false sense of urgency and working on timelines that you are unaware of, that is problematic and it causes trauma. And we need to talk about that. What are the mental health resources that are being created or offered to people? Not only have you had a traumatic experience and sometimes surgery, but now you're sent home to care for a person who completely relies on you for all of their needs. Like, we have made it nearly impossible and certainly not an experience that people welcome to reproduce in this country. And that's a problem. And in that sense, Bruce, I think you are right to say this is genocide. If we have created a culture that causes people to not want to grow their families and the communities in which we live, that is genocide. So, we need to be talking about those things as well. And not to say that we haven't in this setting, but I think people think about the fact that, like, I could die, and that is very true. But what if you survive and are now left without the skills or the resources or the support to move on in a healthy way? What if your experiences causes you to now parent this child from a place of resentment, or you experience some kind of perpetual persistent health issue because of the birth you had? All of those things affect how we're raising the next generation and what our communities look like. And it goes beyond whether, survival is like the basement, right? For like what should happen when you have a baby. Not, I survived, I made it, and that's something to be, like, we think that's where we, like, that's it. No, that should be the bare minimum, right? I made it out. But what does the entire system look like to be supportive of people after they've made it and now have to go on to parent, work, live, and grow within this community? So I'm sorry to rant about that, but I think sometimes we just like forget that, like, what are we leaving people with? And how does that influence the way that they're raising children? What does that say to our children about their place in this world? And, will they go on and I think a lot of us as Black women, especially, like, when you tell people you're pregnant, they tell you a horror story. And it's like, that does not make me feel good about what's to come. And that narrative needs to change. I mean, I know, if anything else, I want people who want to have children to walk away from this conversation knowing that you can have a good experience. It requires some education and some strategy on your part, but you can have a positive experience. There's nothing wrong with you. We've been birthing babies for thousands of years, on the continent, and hundreds of years here in this country, right? Like, we can do this without technology, without all the fancy things that help us take care of these babies that we had before. There is nothing wrong with the Black female body in a way that says that we cannot do this. These are systemic failures that are not our fault. So do not internalize that. Know that you can have a different experience and that you can make strategic decisions that are going to set you up for success, to build the family and be part of a community in which you thrive and grow.
And I definitely want to be. Oh no, go ahead.
And I was gonna say I hear a lot of that too. Like, oh, we don't have the technology to care for people of color. And the sad truth about it is, as messed up as things were for our great grandparents, it was a lot. It was a lot safer for our
Yes.
great grandparents to give birth
Yes.
than it is for us today. And
Yep.
that's just the sad truth. And we're supposed to be moving forward. We're supposed to be the most advanced. And yet this is what we're seeing, and yet again, this is through that assembly line, and through the C sections where we're seeing this, mortalities and morbidities. Like, it's absolutely disgusting, and it's clearly racist. I hate when people say, "Oh, or how do you know it's racist?"
Right.
It's clearly racist. Because they don't treat other people like this. Amber, as her health was deteriorating, and she's trying to get FMLA, Her health is clearly deteriorating at this point, and they're telling her, oh well, why should you why should you get FMLA a month early, because she was trying to get it for April instead of May, because we were originally due May 30th, 2020. And she passed away in April, and she was trying to get early FMLA for April. Meanwhile, there were white women at the same time who were due after Amber, who were getting early FMLA, early disability. They got to stay home with their families and got to be safe, while we were out dealing and handling with COVID and trying to navigate through that. So just the stresses that it's putting on a woman, and the stresses that it's putting on families. But yeah, we're clearly dealing with a racist system, a truly biased system. And I say this all the time, like there's clearly this agenda that's infiltrated our human and civil rights, and it's just been going on, and I'm just glad that these conversations are being had now.
And
Bruce,
that
will
probably,
you give us? I'm sorry.
no,
Bruce, I just want you to give us the timeline for when your son was born and when we lost Amber, because I want to make a point about what that looks like for people.
So we found out, because this is a pregnancy that we planned for. This is not something that just happened. We prepped months in advance. We were having discussions about having a baby August 2019. September 27th, she of 2019, she found out she was pregnant. As of December 2019, her platelet levels were deteriorating at this point, and this was months before COVID wasn't announced until in New York City until mid-February, or until March, really, is when this was really being brought up, and they were trying to blame it on COVID and all this other stuff. But we were due May 30th, 2020. Amber was actually supposed to receive her master's degree the same month. So she was actually supposed to walk on stage with our son to receive her master's degree. And unfortunately she didn't make it, and she passed away in 2019. But they found out, I mean 2020, April 2020, whenever they found out that she had HELP syndrome, which is a high elevation of the liver enzymes. And that's when they induced her labor, April 20th of 2020. So our son was 40 days premature. um, and we thought we had all this time, but we clearly didn't. They were losing her paperwork. They were, just doing all this mess. And they really should have been on top of her care. They had 4 months before the pandemic even started to take notice of this, and they didn't. They had 4 or 5 different OBGYNs signing off on her paperwork as her health is deteriorating, as if everything was fine, everything was okay. And yet again, it took a midwife early April. She looked at our paperwork one time and could already tell what the problem was. So yeah, that's what it was. We found out we were pregnant September 27th, 2019. We were due May 30th. And Amber lost her life April 20th of 2020.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask because I wanted to remind people that a lot of times when we hear about maternal mortality and loss in pregnancy and the postpartum period, it is not a sudden thing. There are things that were overlooked. There have been things that have been missed for Black women. Preeclampsia and eclampsia, which can lead to HELP syndrome, is the number one cause of our death in pregnancy and the postpartum period. And I just want people to know that. So it's preeclampsia, it's embolism, which are blood clots, it's hemorrhage, which is when you bleed too much. And that typically occurs as the baby is being born and right after. And then postpartum cardiomyopathy, which is just a weakening of your heart muscle, right? So the blood is not flowing to all your other organs and throughout your body well. So those are things that in most cases do not happen suddenly, aside from hemorrhage. There are at your appointments when they're checking your blood pressure and you're saying I have a headache, or like my vision is sometimes blurry, or I am winded, I have shortness of breath. All signs of blood clots, all signs
Mm-hmm.
of the high blood pressure is the biggest sign for preeclampsia. When I have clients come in and that blood pressure is not trending as it has been, if I see that, like more than one time, and I know it's just an off thing, we're about to have some conversations. We're about to start checking the protein in your urine. We're about to start doing things to be proactive to make sure that we do not get to the point of HELLP syndrome. So these are things that you and you as a pregnant person, but also your family, the people who see you often. There are things that people can notice and look for. How is your breathing? Yes, at the end of pregnancy, everybody gets a little out of breath more quickly. But is this, something that is always the case? Do you have headaches? Things like that. That it's just you might not. You are living in your body, which means that once something starts to happen, it may just feel normal to you. But the reality is the people around you can be super supportive and helpful in saying, we are seeing these symptoms, we have concerns, and raising flags to your provider. So please, 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 do not feel like just because you are the observer and not the one who is pregnant, you cannot be integral to the health and safety of that mama and that baby.
And that there are always options too. I feel like people aren't aware that they have options. After Amber's passing, even though she gave, after stepping into this work and speaking to so many doctors and going over her records and speaking to doctors around the world, really, not just in the U.S., they were bringing to my attention with the way that her platelet levels were designed at, a certain point. Even though she gave birth prematurely by 40 days, um, there was still an option of pulling the baby out 6 weeks prior to that and saving both of them. But no such option was presented to us because they were trying to, find excuses or throw other doctors or other providers under the bus, or really just not paying attention to us and our vitals and everything that's going on to our bodies. Um, but yeah, it's just really unfortunate finding out that there were options after the fact, and that's what kills me the most, because no such options were presented to us. They wanted to blame COVID and think she had COVID so bad, because if you have COVID, there's really nothing you can do. You can't take legal action or anything. Um, and after finding out that she didn't have COVID, they knew that they were in hot water. So that there just know that there's always options, and that a provider's word isn't law. A lot of times we feel like that their word is law. We have to listen to them. That was my biggest mistake. Thinking that these people are um, medical professionals who know what they're doing, and I should be calm and let them do their jobs. But clearly we have to intervene, and we have to advocate for ourselves and our partners until somebody hears us. I tell people all the time, hey, because they come to me, hey, my provider isn't looking at me. I just gave birth and I'm having headaches or I'm having stomach cramps, and I tell them straight up, hey, they're not answering their call. They're not answering your voicemail. Go stand in front of their office until you are seen. I don't care if I don't care if they're going on lunch, whatever. Stand in front of their office until you are seen, because that's just the case. We're not being properly evaluated, so we're seeing things like uh, we're seeing like pulmonary embolisms and things like that are killing women afterwards. So just making sure that you're being seen, that you're being heard, by any means necessary. Even if you have to find a new provider, just know that there are other options out there for you.
Wow. I want to thank each of you for your courage today, for your vulnerability. And a big shout out to you, Bruce, for like resharing that story. I know that has to be very hard. So I want to thank you each for your courage, for your strength, and being vulnerable with us. And I hope that of the folks that are listening and watching us at home, that if you're feeling alone in your journey, that you know that there are people here to support you. There are people who are doing this work every day, and you're not alone. Um, and I just hope that each of you continues to do the great work that you do, and I hope that you are supported. And Unscripted is here for you all. Unscripted is here to promote what you're doing and to, the ultimate goal, like you said, is to bring more of our people into this work. so that it's not rare, right? It's not rare that our people are getting the help that they need. So thank you each for sharing your stories, for giving your time today to make an impact on, the birth outcomes for our people. Because at the end of the day, this is about sustaining Black life. It's about keeping us here on this planet against the forces that are trying to take us out. But we've been here forever. We were the original people, the original people of the planet, and we're still standing. We're going to keep standing. So, in closing, I just want us to just quickly just tell where people can find you if they want to get more information about the work that you do, or if they want to actually join in and do some of that work that you're leading right now. So I want to start with Bruce. If you could drop like your social, your Instagram, or your website, or however best people can get in contact with you.
So the best way to get in contact with us is I can be reached on Instagram, Bismack the Third, or at Save a Rose Foundation, or you could also visit savearosefoundation.org. We're constantly loading information on there, and donations, and figuring out how people can help, and really be a part of the change. But yeah, that's how you can reach out to us. We're more responsive through email when it comes to inquiries, because I get flooded with social media messages. So the best way to reach out to us is through email. And I also want to recognize Amber Rose Isaac as well. Her birthday is this month. Her birthday is on February 23rd. She would have been 28. And really just honoring her legacy and the other women this month for Black History Month as well, who have meaninglessly lost their lives due to medical racism. Um, and yeah, just everybody, please stay woke, pay attention, and please take care of yourselves by any means necessary.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And now I want to pass it over to Courtney for sharing how people can connect with you as well.
Absolutely. So I can be found as Future Baby Catcher on Instagram and Facebook. You will find me there. My DMs, I do check them. If you want to reach out to me that way, that is cool. My website is spiritofthemidwife.com. There is a contact button. You can send me an inquiry. If you just want to chat, if you are interested in becoming a doula or finding a path to midwifery or some other kind of work, I am always, always, always willing to chat with people who are interested in the work. So just reach out to me.
So, of course, and sorry, my eyes are misty. I'm a little emotional, but you guys can absolutely find me on Instagram. Of course, I'm running Unscripted, so you can always reach out to Unscripted if you have any type of conversation that you want to add to this conversation, or if you have any thought or different conversation that you think needs to be had. On Unscripted Conversations, feel free to reach out, because we definitely want to make sure that we are continuing to redefine our own narrative and to share the ways and the things that we can do to better empower our people to take back control of our own community. So follow me on follow me on Instagram. Folasade Ogunmokun is my whole name, or you can just reach out through Unscripted TV.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for today. And we're about to wrap, but one final thought. There are a lot of women out there who, may hear a lot of the challenges and may feel discouraged. What's one piece of advice that you will give these women to continue on their journey, continue growing our race in spite of all of this? So what's one piece of advice you would give to a woman who is pregnant or considering getting pregnant? And I want to start. Who wants to start?
I just want to share that your fertility is your freedom, and that's for men and women. So, as much as we in a capitalist society are often controlling it because we want to make sure that we are bringing children into healthy, whole homes with stability, at the same time, the ability to reproduce is a gift. And don't allow the fear of the medical industrial complex or the circumstances that you hear about or the concerns that you have to keep you in a place and space of fear. Birthing is power. To be able to grow and birth and nourish a human is a gift that everyone does not have. And to do so is an exertion of your power in the world, and a gift to our society. So do not be afraid. If I say nothing else, do not be afraid of reproducing and birth. There are resources available to you. You have power within you, and the knowing what you need and what you want is yours, and you can make it happen. So I just want everyone to know that for as much as we have these conversations, do not be discouraged. Birth is our birthright.
Yeah, and I completely agree. But my message would be to see a midwife right off the bat. But whether it's before you're planning on starting a family, or if you're already starting a family, please just see a midwife to find out all of your options. And receive options that are completely non-biased. Um, that would be my piece of information, because midwives save lives, and I truly believe that. Um, and they'll find the options for you, and they'll present these options to you. Um, there are people who tailor to your needs, and if we're not tailoring to the need, then we are not meeting the care. So yeah, see a midwife, please.
And mine would be agreeing with both of them because I, I wish I had an advocate. I wish that I was able to do certain things, and just being able to have these conversations with both of them and all the work that they've been able to do, I feel I agree 100%. One, get a midwife, and two, fertility is your freedom. So like, yeah, I took both great points from you guys. Midwives save lives, and fertility is your freedom, and I respect and I agree with both of you. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. This is a great
Yeah,
All
conversation.
right.
thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
E.
us.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce, Courtney, Folasade. Y'all were awesome. And that's it for this episode of Unscripted Conversations. Have a good night. Wow. Courtney, Bruce, and Folasade truly bared their hearts to us in this conversation. And I'm so grateful that we have people advocating for us and doing this great work every day. Please follow them on social media, support their work, and find a way to help in your community in the fight for freedom and dignity in the birth process and the fight for sustaining Black life. I want to leave you with their closing lines. Your fertility is your freedom, and midwives save lives. Until next time, I'm Folasade Pyne, the host of Unscripted Conversations.